Let me introduce myself. I'm Frank Riemensberger. I'm running our Accenture business in the German-speaking region. And I've been working on the German platform initiative, Industry 4.0, for 7 years now. And actually, when we look at how this initiative has evolved over the years, it started with the idea that, and obviously that's clear, Germany is a large engineering and manufacturing nation. It started with the idea that if we add digital to the engineering manufacturing products, we're going to gain a lot of efficiency and we're going to gain a lot of flexibility in basically driving the engineering manufacturing process. And I think what the country has learned and what the many industry players have learned in Germany over the past 7 years, it doesn't stop there. What we have seen with many examples is when you have a product and you make the product smart, when you have a product which is run by an operating system with lots of sensors, then not only you can engineer and manufacturing the product much better, but you can actually be with the product while the product is operated. You can capture the data which is created while the product is operated, and you can generate dynamically data, and from the data you can dynamically generate services which are added to the product, and suddenly the product and service bundle, the smart product and the smart services, allows you to give new promises to the customer, to the user of the product. Think about the train which doesn't run, think about the train which is punctual. Autonomous driving, think about the car which drives itself with a promise it's going to be secure. And suddenly you recognize it's not about incremental change to engineering and manufacturing. Suddenly you recognize it's about reinventing your business model. And that is a panel this morning. We have 4 esteemed speakers. We have Carsten Knoop from FAZ. Carsten is covering the Industry 4.0 movement. You are responsible for digital products. You are covering all the big and medium-sized companies in Germany. You have observed what they're doing. We have Omar Bosch. Omar has been for many years our growth and strategy lead for Accenture. Where is Accenture going? You had all the investment money, and Omar made the decision to invest into the Industry X business before now you're running one of the P&Ls, one of the largest P&Ls actually, who is engaged in this, CMT. Svenja is our researcher in Industry X, and Svenja and I, that's a little bit marketing in our own case. We have authored a book which says, Defending Champion, how will the German industry stay ahead in the digital transformation? And Svenja is actually running the digital business model streams of the Industry 4.0 platform in Germany. And then we have Bernd. Bernd, you're a board member with SAP. You are with SAP, one of the software providers who really actually have thought through what does the platform economy mean. And you are chairing actually the Industry 4.0 platform, which is cross-industry in Germany. You see what all the companies are doing. And I think we have a great panel this morning, and we thought, why don't we start that each of the panelists gives the 5-minute introduction on his observation how digitization and Industry 4.0 and Industry X is actually changing the industry and changing the business models. And I think we just go in sequence. Carsten, you want to start?
Of course. Thank you, Frank. Good morning. And I guess you're right. German industry has gotten the message. Lots of companies are establishing their very own platforms to collect data and to draw their conclusions from it. There are the Siemenses of the world, Software AG, Bosch IoT, and many others. And since you asked to give a certain example to get a grip on it, I will certainly do that. And I picked a truly European company for that. It's Airbus. And you can see what's happening when you look at this new A350 airplane, the newest plane Airbus is building. In this plane, you will find 250,000 sensors that are checking around 900,000 parameters all the time. It's in a single day of use of this aircraft, 300 gigabytes of data. And this data alone was disregarded years ago, like 98% of it. Nobody took any notice of it. Nobody cared. But that changed. Since Airbus established a data platform that's called Skywise, and all the data of all 10,000 Airbus planes that are able to cater to that is put into this thing, and of course it's an open platform also. So if you want to, you can add Boeing planes to this database too. So then you start a true learning process, which leads to the best outcome you can conceive of is that you reduce downtime of those airplanes to zero, right? And that's just the beginning. It's more than predictive maintenance. Those Airbus guys can build on that, like Frank said, and establish even more products while learning their planes better all the time, right? So that's a true change, and I guess they do have a competitive advantage with that, and it's just one example for lots of things that are happening in Germany and Europe.
So what you're saying is the smart products becoming real? It's actually not it's platforms.
They are here.
They are here. Platform allows to be with the products, and actually it's not about the one product, it's about the fleet, and you learn from 10,000 planes being operated.
Right.
That is changing industry.
Totally. Those were basically dumb planes. People didn't know what really happened, right? When it comes to things you don't know, and you learn anew. You don't know what will be the outcome, and that's the funny and the most exciting thing about that. What's upon us, right? And when people say we will be losing so many jobs because of digitalization, they just don't know what's going on, since nobody can even it's not in the stars, right? We have to learn from the data what will be happening there, and I'm totally sure there will be lots and lots of new jobs coming out of this.
Yeah. Excellent, Carsten. And I think we're going to drill on what you said. Platforms play a role, data play a role, artificial intelligence plays a role.
Of course, artificial intelligence is used to sort out what.
And we'll explore how that all hangs together. Omar, you started the Industry X practice in Accenture. What is your perspective on what's happening in the digitization of the business-to-business industries?
Yeah. So, Frank, if you let me, I'm going to sort of meander a little bit and just tell a bit of a story. So, when everyone thinks about digital in the world today, we often think about things like e-commerce. And one of the things that always is a bit striking when you look at the data is, despite all the noise and all the change and all the disruption, e-commerce has been about $150, $200 billion business to date, out of a $6 trillion retail business. So e-commerce is not even that pervasive in retail. Digital has hardly touched healthcare, industrial, insurance, all the other sectors. So, my assertion to my colleagues is we're very early in the digital revolution in business and society today, still. And yet even though we're early, the effects have already been very profound. And so, in the industries that I look after now, as Frank mentioned, communications, media, and technology, if you look at the telecommunications companies 5 years ago and looked at their revenue growth over the last 5 years, you'll see that it's come down by about 5% as a percentage of all the comms and media and tech revenues of about 300 companies. But their EBIT has gone up in the meantime. The EBIT percentage has gone up. Their market cap has gone up about 5%. But the software and platform companies that they're increasingly competing with, their market cap has gone up by 50%, so 10 times more. In other words, this early stage of disruption, what we're seeing is a huge migration of value from some set of companies into another set of companies. And of course, what I'm very intrigued by is, why does that happen and what do you do about it? And it turns out that every company, including especially all the industrial ones that we're talking about here, Frank, the potential value creation from modern innovation technology versus the actual value creation from modern innovation technology is diverging. So modern innovation is able to offer much more routes to value than we're using. And that's intriguing, to say the least. So then you say, well, why is that? And it turns out that there are lots of good reasons, why that is. But to date, the biggest value creators you'll look at are these big platform companies. And so let's pick 7 companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, those companies that you know. And people say, I want to be like them. And the answer is you can't be like them. And you can't be like them because they already have massive market share in their domain. There's about 3 or 4 companies that have $100 billion of cloud business. Alibaba is 51% of e-commerce in China. Tencent is 52% of gaming in China. There's huge concentration in the segments they're in. And so given that we can't be them, the question is what can we learn from them? And it turns out that companies that do make use of modern innovation think hard about, what, as Frank said, the evolution of product into service, the personalization of product in a way that does indeed leverage data but is not creepy in terms of engaging with customers, and using things like content to engage with brands. So when I see that BMW has put Tmall inside its cars in China, I was very intrigued by that. So this is the e-commerce marketplace of Alibaba inside BMW cars. Or when Renault-Mitsubishi Alliance are putting Google's Android operating system for the infotainment of their cars, again, that's intriguing. I mean, so they're finding ways of using content to engage with customers. If you think of a group like WeDoctor, which is a company in China. I think it's about $6 billion last time I checked. So with WeDoctor, you can use an Amazon Echo type speaker to engage with your physician, your GP. You can arrange your appointments. You can follow up your online consultation. You can get your prescriptions and your medicine. And you can connect it with wearables and other devices for tracking your health overall. And obviously, the rules around privacy and data vary from one culture to another. And so you could imagine that in a country like China, the incredible value of the data that they can capture for creating these completely brand new business models. And so then last comment I'll make, Frank, is if you go and look at Hans Vestberg's speech at CES just a couple of weeks ago, and so he's the CEO of Verizon, which is a big telecommunications company in the US, and just say, what's the impact of 5G technology, which is this hyperconnectivity, where everything is connected, but at a very different level from today, at least 50 times faster and richer in terms of the connection. Then you start to see amazing brand new business models emerging around healthcare, around drones, and frankly, every other space you care to think of. So I guess all I'm saying is we're very early in this digital evolution. The potential value creation is huge. We're just not all capturing it yet.
So Omar, what you're saying is platforms allow and support the migration of value, actually between industries and industry players. Fusion is important, products and services, and new business models bring it to life.
Yes, I mean, without being oversimplistic, and Bernd no doubt will comment on this, we've seen a migration of value in our sectors from hardware to software to platform. And that will happen not just in the tech industries, but all industries.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Omar. Svenja, you are moderating the German discussion across, I think, 50 companies, how to migrate the German economy to digital business models. What are you learning? What are the beliefs? What's going on in that discussion group?
I think there are 3 major trends that are interconnected and intertwined that are currently discussed in the industry. The first one is, and Omar said that value is moving from products to services. This is already well known, and industry has reacted to that by sort of sugarcoating, if you will, the products and the machine with digital services, smart services. But this is not the end. So we are now seeing new business models emerging where sort of the smart services are generated from the product and operation. What Frank said earlier, so it's not the sophistication of the engineering of the train that makes the train company competitive, but that the train is on time. So this all makes data absolutely critical for business success. And our ability to actually collect it and share it becomes even more important. We have become better in that. But what is the task at hand now is also to price, to trade, and to monetize this. And there is a lot of work to do in order to do that. The platform, and Omar talked about the platform economy. If you look at sort of the 10 largest, most valuable companies by market cap, 7 out of the 10 are platform companies. 5 from the US and 2 from China. And their business model in the B2C sector mainly is to put themselves between demand and supply, and through controlling the intersection to the customers, they have built quasi-monopolies. Now, what is happening in B2B? What is happening in the B2B industries? There, we do not have that winner takes it all model yet. But if sort of this, what is happening now is that sort of the service creation, the value creation starts with the data, with the way the end user, the end consumer uses the product, then we will probably see not only a merger of B2B and B2C, but also a completely new sort of world in this regard as well. So everybody can, in that world, industry convergence becomes real. Everybody can become your competitor, but also everybody can become your partner. If you look at HERE, for example, which provides location services, they are sort of owned by automotive companies that are normally competing. And HERE, for example, has a chief platform officer. For them, it's crucially important to get their platform business right. The third thing that I would like to say is how important the shifts that we are seeing from a geopolitical perspective are at the moment. Last year, we were here and everybody was talking about Uber and Amazon and stuff like that. Now, our eyes have moved from Silicon Valley to Shenzhen, and competition in the B2B sector in particular will be very much driven what is happening in China. So we have always been a little bit sort of disrespectful of the factory of the world and the copycat. This is over. So China has taught us a lesson that you do not need free vote, free speech to be very innovative and to actually lead the way when it comes to digital revolutions. Technology is now a very, very, very important part of countries' strategies. 25 countries have issued artificial intelligence strategies in the last 18 months. And this really shows us that technological leadership has become a decisive factor in countries' competitiveness and also in the way companies embrace it.
That's interesting, Svenja. We're going to do a deep dive on this one. As you say, it's about the product, it's about the data, the new business models, but you're saying something else. A single company is not able to compete at the end. You say this is a geopolitical play. Yeah. And based on the geo you're working in, there are digital infrastructures being built with different means which make whole companies competitive. I think we should explore that in our discussion. That's an interesting thought. Bernd, you are building platforms. Your customers use platforms. You are chairing the Industry 4.0 initiative. How do you see the platform economy coming to B2B, to industry?
Yeah, good morning, Frank. Very insightful comments already, Carsten, Omar, Svenja. And first of all, I want to underscore what you said. Omar, you said we are going from product to service to platform. And as a company who is now almost 47 years serving the industry with software, we have been strategizing in our board. And we added one essential element, which we found out is the root cause for that trend. And when you think of a platform, when you think of moving from product to service, when you think of new business models, it is the experience category that is driving that behavior. And what do I mean with the experience? It's either the experience of a customer or a passenger. That's your example with the train. It's either the experience with a product, when you move from product to the service, because people ultimately do not want to own a product. They want to consume the service, the outcome the product is delivering to you. And therefore, we as a company said, after talking on the NDA with analysts, we want to add a category or a segment which we call experience into our portfolio, because without that experience, we feel that we will not be able to serve the needs of our customer in the future. And we have been coming to that insight, and you ask for some examples, by just evaluating what some thought leaders, what some customers have been doing and co-innovating together with us. And I have brought 3 examples. One example is Käser. This is a company who is manufacturing compressors, producing compressed air. And their business model was for a long time just bringing out the next generation of a compressor, which is probably using less energy, which is more reliable, which has a longer duration, which is a German company, so it has to be competitive against upcoming low-cost compressors from Southeast Asia. And this company has introduced then a new business model, has provided compressors for free into factories, and was evaluating whether they only charge for the outcome, which is the cubic meter of compressed air, leading to a much better, and here comes the experience, to a much better experience, because their customers do not need to think about a replacement when a compressor is broken. Their customers do not need to think about of a service, because they are connected to these compressors and will send a service technician automatically repairing it. So the experience of having a high quality product was automatically coming with the business model and with the connectivity. Another company I have brought, another example is Munich Re. In a time where the weather conditions are more extreme, where we see long periods where it's very dry, where we have wildfires, in a time where then we have suddenly a huge amount of rain or a huge amount of snow, to be a reinsurance company and providing kind of a safety against these natural catastrophes, they were thinking about how can they limit their own business risk. And the idea was to use data, to use geospatial data, which is provided by the satellites on a permanent basis. Was not intended to be used by the reinsurance companies, just for predicting weather, for observing the planet. And we have built a model that they can use the geospatial data to observe patterns when is a natural catastrophe going to happen, and implement a prediction model for that. Of course, the initial driver was limiting the risk for them and increasing financial success for them as a company. But as an outcome, what they do is making the world run better, and I would say in this case even improve people's life, because with that early warning system, they have a very strong interest that the early warnings get communicated immediately to the people which are affected then in these areas, so they can be evacuated. And I think this is another example where they are using data, and the next generation of what we will do with them is what Airbus is doing with the sensors. If you then penetrate the planet with sensors, then you have as well information from the ground, whether the ground is dry, leading to a wildfire, which is easily, let's say, stopped if you stop it at the beginning. And by the way, some agricultural companies have learned from that and are starting monitoring their agricultural areas with drones, being able to immediately kill a wildfire when it's getting started. And a third company, which is GEA, they have learned from that as well. They are connecting their machines as well permanently to their service center, delivering that high quality of products. So these are 3 examples which I have brought with me. And what do they all have in common? They have the experience segment, and sometimes you have to capture experience of passenger in trains, of from social media, how to consume a product. And the key for success is to connect the experience data with the operational data of the engineers to engineer the next generation of a train or the next generation of a compressor, whatever the product is. But it's not the primary driver of engineering the next generation of product, rather understanding the customer and the experience you have with the product. And we have identified, this is my closing statement, 3 areas which are essential for such a success. Number 1, it's culture. These companies have to, from the top, bring the message to their people that they have to reinvent themselves. Just saying we have been successful for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 10 decades is a recipe for success in the future, will not work. If the people in the company are not accepting that reinvent message, it's hard. Number 2, then you cannot, the second dimension is people. You cannot just push technology on the people and say, figure it out how it works. You have to show leadership, embrace opinions of the people, educate and upskill the people, that the most asset you have in a company, which is the people, are driving that and do not have to be driven by a few people sitting at the top of the company. And sometimes even the people at the top of the company do not have the most brilliant ideas. These are coming from the crowd. And the third element is then the technology itself. You have to understand which technology to use in which business opportunity, and are not starting to have a technology talk with your customer, turning that in a value discussion, articulating the opportunities. If you follow then these 3 principles, then you have an opportunity for success.
Bernd, thanks a lot. And I love the examples because I think they show the opportunity, but they show as well the challenge. In order to change your business model, you just talked about it, you have to create more and better products, you have to create platforms, you have to start dealing with data you didn't have before. You have to basically rethink to give new promises to your customers. Mm-hmm. You have to add things you didn't do before. You have to add banking and insurance, where this was out of your scope. Suddenly it's in your scope if you operate a product. So the change is enormous. And maybe that is if we go through 3 rounds of discussions, Svenja said it. We see geopolitical regions now, or countries competing on technology strategy, where they say, we're going to create technology infrastructure to support our industries. That is a competitive, race going on. And maybe that's one thing we explore. Secondly, what does a company do? And then thirdly, how do we change the culture in the company? If we explore these 3 themes, but maybe let's start with the geopolitical. China. China has probably the most ambitious industry strategy based on technology. China 2025, they say we want to be leaders in 12 industries, by the way, which many of them are German lead industries, so we have to watch out. And they are building digital infrastructure for the industry. If you look what the platform is about, it's actually it's not that complicated. 3 things, if you really simplify. It's digital identity, it's the ability to pay, and it's a service architecture which is 2-sided, allows people to meet and match up services across industry. And China is putting lots of money to build this digital infrastructure to support all the industries. We have seen the Silicon Valley do that with a not state-run, but investor-run. And then the question is, where does it leave Europe? Maybe Omar, your thoughts on the race of nations to build new industries based on technology, the US, China, and Europe. Any observations?
Yeah, this is a tricky topic.
Absolutely. We are in Davos.
Yeah. If you reflect back on the era straight after the Second World War, America was incredibly gracious in deciding to tax its citizens in order to rebuild broken countries. And actually, that was the beginning of the establishment of what we call the world order, that we've all loved and admired for the last few decades. America today doesn't believe it's well served by the rules of that world order that it itself established then. And I think it would be a mistake to assume that the current sounds coming out of the current US administration will pass if there's a change of administration, because actually I think a lot of the views in America on trade and strategic long-run competition cross party lines. So I think that this is a new reality that we're going to be living with for a while. You know, on the flip side, China, if you go back to the beginning of the 2000s, would have been a major beneficiary from joining in the world order of the time and wanted to accede to the WTO and all these other organizations, and in fact has demonstrated the most unbelievable creation of wealth in the entire of human history of the last 20, 30 years in China. But today, China is already amazingly strong. It's the #2 biggest economy and likely to become the #1 biggest economy. When you think about the Belt and Road Initiative, China's need for the world order is also less. So you have these two incredibly strong countries whose need for the world order that we've all become accustomed to and that we spoke about a lot in Davos is lower than it may have been. And the question is, well, who needs that world order? And the answer is Europe, plus some other nations like Japan and Latin America and various other places. So I think actually Europe has to decide if it's willing to lead and step forward. I remain optimistic because notwithstanding the long-run strategic competition in many different areas, and technology is one of them, of course, there are lots of reasons for us in the world to come together and collaborate on certain things. And I'll just pick on a couple of examples. So I'm very proud that Accenture is a founding father of the World Economic Forum's Center for Cybersecurity, which you'll hear more about this week. It turns out that 90% of the malicious activity on the internet is criminal, which is not nation-state sponsored. It's sponsored by bad actors. And it's in everyone's interest, whether you're Chinese, Russian, American, Belgian, to collaborate to solve those issues. And cross-national institutions like the Cybersecurity Center of the WEF is a way in which we can continue to reach across boundaries that otherwise look difficult in order to collaborate to solve problems. But just to conclude, when I grew up in our business, we used to say that technology was an enabler, IT was an enabler. I don't believe that anymore at all. In fact, for a company to succeed, it needs to be awesome at technology. You have to be totally technology propelled. The leadership need to totally get technology, no matter what the sector is. Otherwise, you will lose. It's 100% clear today. And of course, the same applies to nations. And so technology is a strategic national interest. And I think countries and companies have to pay a lot more attention than maybe they may have 10 or 15 years ago.
Omar, thanks a lot. And let's build on that. I think what you're saying is, and I put the things together, platforms are a way to support migration of value to the platform runners. And we see that in the US and the China. And possibly there is a view, if I have these platforms, I need less of the world order. We don't have platforms in Europe. We have GDPR. We have the Trust Initiative. I think we are the leaders of, in Europe, the thinking how to deal properly with data. But Carsten, maybe I ask you, is that enough to survive? Or do we need, beyond the right approach, do we need much more digital infrastructure in Europe to lead?
It's obviously not enough to survive, but it's a beginning. Since European values and the maturity of our societies, they are an asset, they are not a liability. The trust we have upon European nations and the values we have, they are more sophisticated than the ones we are being confronted with in China, for example. So one could get a little bit depressive while looking on China and all the progress they are making, but still it's a system and a society. I have my doubts when it comes to sustainability, obviously. I mean, we can all hope that they are some sort of sustainable, but still we can be a little bit more self-confident, and so those rules, as much as I hated personally GDPR when I had to introduce that with our digital assets at Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, that was a hassle, and we could go on and on about this regulation. I guess in its core, it's all right that we are trying to set European standards, which maybe spill over to the world. I mean, the US is looking at those standards, and there are some CEOs from the US that do really like it. For example, Tim Cook, Apple's CEO, he likes GDPR. So that's okay, but not enough. And so there has to be more, and obviously it's infrastructure. This 5G discussion we have in Germany, with the upcoming auction, and who is going to pay for what, what's good, what's bad, how do we manage roaming between new competitors that want to come in and the three ones that are already there? What about prices in Germany when it comes to mobile coverage? That doesn't look good. Still, if you look a little bit closer, those frequencies we are talking about right now aren't the ones that are able to provide Germany with 5G all around. So it's a little bit premature discussion. We need to bring 4G to the entire country. That's the most important thing. So let's just start with that. But while listening to German politicians and European politicians too, it takes a little bit longer, but they too get the message of digitalization, and now basically it's just do it, and I hope every day that they will start and accelerate.
I think, but what you're saying is we have to build on our strengths, and right. I think we agree on that, but then all panelists said it's about data, and with GDPR we basically created ourselves a framework of rules what not to do with the data. And maybe I go to Svenja and say, Svenja, if you look at the German business-to-business industry, that is not enough to survive. So is there not an opportunity to create the world-leading data marketplaces where you can price data, trade data, rather than doing it behind the back, bring it to the light, give it a value, and have people decide, have business decide, if they want to pitch in against money. And I think there's a big opportunity because these infrastructures for business to business, don't exist yet in the world. Right. So isn't there an opportunity for Europe to create digital infrastructure to lead in B2B? What is your thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have actually the response to the platform revolution in the B2C era is, at the moment, there are three things. There are data marketplaces, and there are a couple of government-initiated and also private company initiatives. They don't really fly yet. Then there is the topic around interoperability of platforms, which is actually a very interesting one. I already said earlier that in the B2C you have that monopoly. In B2B you don't have that, and you don't have that for a number of reasons, because obviously the manufacturing sector is so specific, so special, that this this exchange model that you have on Amazon, it just doesn't work. Yeah, and the third thing that one could explore are completely new technologies where you actually ensure that the data stays with the company rather than exchanging it. So we have, in the book that Frank has mentioned, we have actually argued for, rather than issuing 100 professorships in artificial intelligence, which our government wants to do, rather thinking of also investing in areas where we could explore those new technologies that enable the platform economy in B2B in Europe.
Yeah. And I just picked this up, Bernd. In the Industry 4.0 platforms, we are thinking, and under your leadership, we are thinking through, can't we create in Europe the digital identity for machines? Mm-hmm. You know, and Germans are very good at standardization with the Dean. Couldn't we come up as Europe with the digital register for every machine in the world? Couldn't we create interoperability, API structures, to access every machine and give it up to the machine operator, whoever has a right, to pitch in the data to data marketplaces, create these data marketplaces, create rules and frameworks, how to price industrial data? It doesn't exist today. Isn't there an opportunity for Europe?
And first of all, definitely the opportunity is there. But as you said in your opening statement, we have to observe what is happening geopolitically. There is the conversation, the dialogue, you could say the fight between US and China. If you look at Europe, I rather see a tendency for isolation than for collaborating and uniting and build a union. We don't know how, if we have a controlled Brexit, if we have no Brexit, if we have an uncontrolled Brexit, and we have just a couple of weeks to go until the first deadline is coming.
So you say we're busy with other stuff.
We are indeed busy with other stuff instead of focusing on what is essential for our future. I wouldn't go beyond healthiness. I would say for the sovereignty of companies, of industries, of states. And why do I say sovereignty? I just look at, we as SAP said, in preparation for the World Economic Forum, we did a survey and asked people, not just politicians and leaders in companies, and we reached out to more than 10,000 people across 29 countries, covering 75% of the global population. And it was interesting. We asked just 8 questions, and I summarized that 76% of the people all around the globe reject populism and are in very strong favor of openness and collaboration. I mean, this is a very strong signal if you ask the people on the street. And we thought, okay, if this is the case, then we need a call for action. That goes back to your question on standardization. Can we be the trigger for giving every machine an identity? And that starts with having an answer for the infrastructure and the platform topic, which we have been debating. Or do we want to depend on, as an industry, on the ones which exist in the US and the 2-3 ones which exist in China? The question I'm asking this is, I think the answer is clear. If we want to keep our sovereignty, we must not allow that the world economy is relying on these 4 or 5 infrastructures with platforms. And my second call to, so this is an ask for collaborating across industries, across companies, across countries. My second call to action is towards the government. Historically, a government has decided which part of an infrastructure do they want to own, do they at least partially own as state-owned properties. This was going into the direction of electricity. This was going into the infrastructure, just looking out on streets.
The roads, yeah.
The roads, because the government felt that this part of the infrastructure is essential for the success and guarantees as well, I would say, access to the infrastructure for the whole society. If digital, if software, if platform are driving the future, I wonder why not European governments, why not country governments are rethinking on as well, at least partially owning and driving that infrastructure and platform. And this is my second call to action. Otherwise, there is a risk that when they identify it, they lose the sovereignty. And we have seen in history, if you're not in control of your own destiny anymore, then the power might easily switch.
Yeah. I think what you're saying, Bernd, is in Europe, we need an architecture for the digital infrastructure for the industries. And this goes way beyond the 5G discussion.
Way beyond.
Which is a framework. But I think what Europe has failed to do is write down the framework for the digital infrastructure for industries. And Svenja, you said it, we'll see a migration from business to consumer to business to business. There's something to learn. And as I said, the big building blocks, the digital identity of the machines, the way you collect data and monetize data in the open, in the transparency, the way you allow industry convergence by creating APIs so you can access every machine. These are all digital infrastructure components, which if you would put them down into a framework, most likely would apply for the world, not only for Europe. And I think that's an opportunity for Europe because the US hasn't done it. Physical stuff, Professor Sin, you said it this morning, the physical stuff is actually real hard to make and to make sure it works all the time. And the Chinese approach is a different one than the European approach. And I think there's an opportunity for us to come together in Europe and create a framework for digital infrastructure for industries and work the European industries actually to make sure that every company, every industrial company in Europe has something to base on. And obviously that could be an export article. So there's an infrastructure game going on. But then every company has to do their own strategy. Carsten, I look at you. You have written up, I think, all the big players in Germany. You see the companies which are a bit more advanced and some which are a bit more behind. Can you comment on that? Who are the leaders and what are they doing to lead? What are they doing better than the others?
Well, it caters to what we've already been saying here this morning. Obviously, in the German machinery industry, they are building platforms. And like Bosch IoT or Siemens MindSphere, as I've already mentioned, and lots more. The problem is maybe it's too many, and maybe they are a little bit too small. Like, does Trumpf need one? Does Bosch need one? Does Siemens need one? Are they open enough? So it's too many. They've gotten the message, but there are too many islands and they don't really scale. And if you think about artificial intelligence, you need loads of data to make it work, right? And we have to interconnect those things. And I guess Minister Altmaier has promised to share public data for some sort of database to be analyzed by AI. Those are good ideas. We really need to scale. So it's okay. People are discussing the right things in German companies, but they are acting too incremental. You used the word in your introduction. It's always a little bit too shy on. It's always about optimizing products we already have, and it's not the really visionary big step into the unknown. The great leap. German companies don't take it, and that's why, for example, the German car industry is behind for one year or a year and a half behind Tesla when it comes to this. Of course, they do use a better craftsmanship, right? What Professor Zinn said is about craftsmanship, right? We know how to build products, of course, but this leap into the unknown realm of the opportunities of the software and platform world, we're still too shy on that.
I think you have a point on that. Maybe many do not know that, but Tesla is not only famous for electricity, Tesla is running an operating system,
right,
which allows to update the car every weekend with new software components, new functionalities. The software system which runs the Tesla was built by Daimler in Stuttgart. And they didn't do the leap to put it in their own car. Right. They gave it away. And I think that's a great example which brings it to life. I met the guys who created the operating system for the Tesla and said, oh, it's part of the alliance, right?
Their newest electric car is not a 100% engineered car for electricity, right? They build it in Bremen in a factory where they can put the old combustion engine in it and electrical engines, so you don't use all the advantages you might get. So it's a low-risk strategy, and it's not good. Obviously, that applies to the media industry also.
Omar, when it comes to great leaps, looking not in Europe, the world, what are examples you see where you see individual companies have taken the courage and did the great leap, and they succeeded.
So can I be a little bit controversial, if I may? I'm very wary of great leaps, because great leaps in the dark, you might land on your nose.
It's not into the dark.
Yeah. No. So as you know very well, Frank, with Accenture, with our strategy the last few years, we believe in looking at different technology market maturity S-curves, and working differently according to the different levels of maturity of the different segments you're talking about. So some parts of your business you have to evolve incrementally, because there's a lot of near-term profit stream to be derived from that, and others you need to run genuine leap-in-the-dark experiments that don't bet the whole company, but allow you to discover.
I didn't say bet the whole company.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so so actually, when I look at a company like Roche and the experiments they've been doing with buying data and data companies like Flatiron in the US, I think that's very interesting. Yeah. So how do I merge healthcare and patient pathway data with the oncology life cycle of treatment? And I think that kind of strategy is the sort of strategy that we will see be a winner. I mean, Carsten's points about scale, though, I think is a very big deal. I totally agree. And if you look at China, between Alipay and WeChat Pay, that's 90% of payments in the whole country. The country has gone from cash to digital payments in one go. They didn't need credit cards. In Europe, we've got Aiden, we've got Klarna. These are very good payment platforms. But the question is, what's the push behind them to propagate them and to make them more pervasive? And similarly in the industrial space, you can come up with examples of saying, where does it make sense for companies to collaborate and share? So I think we've got work to do on that.
I think you have a point on the financial industry. I think we need a great leap there too, because platform economy, payment is one of the 3 big pillars in that. But don't bet the company, but your example with Roche is a good one. They did a huge bet. It was a few billions. Actually, they invested into data, which is a different thing than investing into substance research.
Absolutely.
And so it's not small things.
No. They're commitments. But Russia's a strong company.
And if I may, look at us. Should we bet the company on the future of a paper edition of our paper? I don't think so, right?
No.
Svenja, if you look at the great leap in Germany, or the controlled great leap, don't follow your nose. I think Omar's right on that one. What do you see in the digital business models arena?
So I think the conviction that no company can do it alone has arrived in the discussion. I think that companies sort of orchestrated by platforms are seeking to build value networks that bring different players, software, products, services together to create new value. So I think this has arrived. The question is, those value networks are not really easy, because they only work if everybody wins. And if you have multiple players, this is very, very difficult, because there's always a control point where there's the risk of dominance. So, but I'm very, very optimistic that we will get there, because this, not invented here or product-centric thinking that we have been discussing quite a lot, this is now moving away to a mindset that thinks from collaboratively created smart services that generate value in the new world. So overall, I see a third way emerging in Germany and Europe, between the state-driven approach in China and the market-driven approach in the US, where friendly cooperation also between competitors will become far more the norm.
So the great leap is not only technology or the business model. The great leap is the way your culture works and how you collaborate.
I think there are many people saying that competition in the future is not between products or services, it's between business models. And business models is something that we today orchestrate between multiple parties.
I think one example to bring that to life, you saw the announcement of Daimler and BMW to merge the autonomous driving initiatives. Yeah. Probably recognizing that one of them alone will not be able to crack the code.
Yeah.
Bernd, SAP did the great leap. A few years ago, you had made as a company a huge decision to say we're going to revamp our product to become a platform and a cloud-based product, which is, back then, it was a bet for the company. How how did you come to the conclusion to do that? It was right, but you only know that after the fact, right? But what was the situation which said, SAP, we're going to take that courageous decision? And by the way, you told your customers, and turn it around, you have to make huge investments to follow us because we will not support over time the legacy you have installed, which is an amazing ask. It worked, but what led to that big decision, which made you market leader in this space?
Yeah, we make the big decision, but one comment: we are not through that transformation completely, as we are only through if all of our customers would have followed us already. And you said it, Omar, with the e-commerce. I think it's a similar comparison. Yes, we have gone through a process of transformation together with our customers. But I would say the big majority of our customers are still on-prem, are still sitting in the traditional world. So, and coming back to your question, what was driving that change? And a first insight, which is very tough in a company to overcome, is you have to give up of owning the stack and the control end to end. If you are not open to that, then you will not succeed in that. Carsten, you mentioned some other examples of companies who have understood that digital is important. You mentioned Trumpf, you mentioned Bosch, you mentioned Siemens. But in all the three examples you have mentioned, which are loyal customers of us, these companies still want to own end-to-end their product and as well the digital offering, while when I'm speaking to them, there is a lot of similarities and commodities instead of sharing that, because this is non-differentiating and costs a lot of money. This is something we had the guts, and thanks to our CEO, who was driving this together with the executive board as well, in some interesting dialogue as well with the shareholders, with the customers, and the supervisory board. And what was key to success was, I would say, the term openness. We have built alliances, of course, with customers, because that's obvious. That's what we did all the time. We have built alliances with partners, and we have built alliances with competitors, as our customers would have done it anyway. And we have been pretty clear that we can't stop that train. So let's rather join the train and see how we can collaborate. The second thing is, what we did was we discussed is we would be open to enable, and that's important, to enable sharing of data across industries and across customers. We decided consciously that we do not own the data of our customers, despite the fact that we have access to them. But we want to encourage companies, industries to work together and build data-driven business model, because we can connect the dots as we understand what the value is there. And the third element of it was beyond going into the cloud and accepting that software will be in future consumed as a service. We were even thinking strategically beyond and said we will go into an era where we will see network of networks. And that starts with very, I would say, commodity processes in companies. Take the category of spend management, which is non-strategic in companies. The spend for travel, the spend for, I would say, commodity products like mineral water, tables, chairs, coffee cups, and as well the spend for not your own people, spend for third-party labor. If you can manage that holistically in a network and have an option which consumers have today, because if some of you spend some money and go into e-commerce, you are not directly usually going on one e-commerce site, selecting a product, because normally you don't know what you want to procure. You just know you want to purchase a coffee cup. But which one you decide based on price, based on time to deliver. And this business network of network was the third element, which we identified early. We have to admit, we learned it from the consumer space and have been convinced that this trend will enter as well into the B2B space and helping our companies to be more successful in the digital world.
So power of ecosystem, enabling sharing of data for data-driven business and network of networks, which basically you see that's where the industry business models are converging to. Okay. And you are enabling that.
Yes.
I don't know if you can answer that, but how far is the industry? And I don't know if it's simple to give a percentage. Are we 10% of the way, 30, 50? What is your feel?
I would say we have not reached 10%.
So right at the beginning?
We are right at the beginning. I would love to say 10% because this is a great number, but I think we are still in the single digit.
Actually, there's another indicator which supports that. If you think how to bring these models to life, you have to go to the cloud. And if you look how much of the industry applications are running in the cloud, because without you can't do it, it's probably less than 10%.
And that's a good example of giving up. Why would a company intend to own a data center, a machine with compute, storage, network, making sure electricity is there? These are all commodity things. Why the hell do I, as a manufacturing company or as a financial service company, intend to own that if I can consume that from somebody else?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I tried to bring it together. And before we have one last statement from each of you, but we talked about the future of the industries. It's about the smart product. It's about being with the product while it's operated. We have to start collecting the data and use the data to optimize the product while it's being operated and give new promises to people who own the product, who use the product, who are basically beneficiary. And that is a different thing. It doesn't replace a product, but it's a product plus service plus outcome in business combination, which is hugely ambitious. We talked about that requires digital infrastructure. The US Silicon Valley has built the business-to-consumer infrastructure, copied by China, and probably, when it comes to payment, exceeded. But there's a digital infrastructure for business-to-business which is not taken yet. I think that's an opportunity for Europe. We talked about it, the identity for machines, the security for the machines, the data marketplaces for machines, the way to build ecosystems across industries. That is something I think we should write down for Europe, and that is what the book is about. And then thirdly, we talked about individual companies. It is a hugely complex transformation. It takes leadership from the top. It takes the culture to willing to change. It takes the courage to do a big leap, but don't fall on your nose, which is absolutely right. Nobody in Europe is prepared to lose everything, which we see once in a while with the investment, with the VC things. And it takes the right people, the right talent. And that leads me to my last question, and I just go around in the same order. If you would be running a company, what would you tell your management team to do to become a leader in the segment? Carsten, what is your advice to the CEO or to the team of the CEO?
You know, I do work for a company for 25 years now that's getting 70 years old this year. And it was hugely successful most of the time. And right now, as it is with all the rest of the media industry, we are really challenged. And what's not really happening is just what Bernd was demanding, that people check their value system within the company. Basically, is this legacy business still something that is going to help us even in the next 5 years, right? Do you really have to leave it behind or not? And I think, yes, we do really have to leave it behind. And they should allow their employees to challenge them more in the daily business on how to change the process, how we make the paper into a process that is up and running 24 hours, 7 days a week in the digital realm, producing basically platform agnostic, right? For digital, for paper, for all our apps, what you name it. And we're still too far from that. We need to change the entire structure on how we work. And if I would have to tell them something, is to encourage their employees to basically lead this change. the employees have to be willing to make the leap also, not just the management. And we need more encouragement there.
So vision, talent, create a culture of change.
Right.
Omar?
So I'm going to finish where I started, which is I mentioned that the potential for value creation is diverging away from the actual value creation that most companies are going with today. So what I say to my team and to all my clients is, firstly, really engage with the modern innovation. Get very close to it, wherever it is in your sector. So whether it's in startup or ecosystems or Shenzhen or wherever it may be, go and get that innovation and bring it into your business. And secondly, I'm agreeing here with Carsten, is be courageous. Be willing to challenge the norms, the culture, the business processes, the business models, challenge everything. And that takes courage actually from the top. And I'm going to make a final plug, if I may, Frank. So if you're super interested in all of this, we've actually put it in a new book about the Accenture story and 150 of our clients called Pivot to the Future. It's published on April 23rd, and you can go and get it on Amazon now.
I think Omar's done something really great. 130 companies looked at their strategies, and you summarized the essence of it.
We're looking very hard at actually what does it really take. And the heart of it, Frank, is that traditional strategy of one-off business transformation doesn't work. That's what we believe.
Pivot to the future.
It's a very different approach. So yeah, pivot to the future is what it's all about.
We'll share that. Svenja?
I would sort of focus on three things. The first question is, what is sort of my role in a platform-driven data economy? So what are the data that I can sort of monetize in the future? The second one is really sort of, what are the partners that I need out of the traditional probably ecosystem that I normally deal with in order to achieve that? And third, very importantly, what does it take to take my people along and make sure that they are ready to embrace the new world?
So the data economy, the ecosystem, and the cultural change. That leaves you, Bernd.
Okay. I mean, the bold sentence would be paranoid and challenge the status quo of the existing business model. And I would encourage not just the leadership, I would encourage every employee to do so. Now, that's easily said. Nevertheless, I would add to that going into platform, going into collaboration, going into alliance requires a lot of trust. However, you need to stay in control of understanding what you are doing. Otherwise, you put your entire company at risk, and that could be, I would say, an acceptable attack of a competitor, which is fair. We are living in an economy where the best shall win, but we have not talked about cybersecurity yet, and there is an estimated annual damage to the industry of roughly $3 trillion today. And I have personally talked to board members who have lost control of the operation of their entire company. And whoever went through that nightmare is understanding that you cannot just go into a digital adventure using platforms, technology, like you use electricity coming out of the plug at the wall. You need to understand as well the risk for the company, because with trust and hope alone, you will not win. And I would give this as well as a signal to my people that they need to stay on top what the new business model will be. That does not mean to correct it, that they have to do everything on their own, but they need to have enough competency, skills, in order to be a partner, to be I would say, a knowledgeable, upskilled workforce, to decide on what risk do you go and where do you say, I'm not going into that risk and build it on trust. I need to own that by myself.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, panel. And I think that brings it nicely together. I use Omar's phrase, pivot to the future. It is engage with modern innovation, have vision, and be specific about your own vision. Create your digital model. Your example, you can't miss out on cybersecurity, otherwise you're dead.
You're dead.
And then engage with your people to drive the change, engage the team to drive the change across the company. And that comes from the top, and I think that's a nice summary of the panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Bernd.